I slid the loan agreement across the table and looked my sister in the eye. This was taken in my name, without my consent. You have 7 days to pay it back, or I press charges. You could have heard a pin drop in that inheritance meeting. My mother froze. My dad wouldn't look at me. And my sister? She asked if I was really willing to ruin family over $60,000. Hi, I'm Jenna, and this is the story of how I uncovered a betrayal so deep it shook the foundation of everything I thought I knew about family. Before we jump into the story, if you don't mind, let me know where you're from by leaving a comment below. That way I can send a special hello your way. Now go ahead, grab yourself a warm cup of water and find a comfy spot. It's time to begin the story. I hadn't stepped onto that porch in 6 years, but the scent of lemon salt and secrets hadn't changed a bit. The wind off the water still curled through the slats like fingers looking for a memory to grab. The hydrangeas, now heavy with bloom, brushed against my arm as I made my way up the steps, store-bought lemon pie in hand. The screen door creaked like it always had. My mother looked up from the outdoor buffet table as if she'd heard a car door she didn't expect. She wore one of those gauzy cream blouses that floated when she walked, her lipstick a bit too perfect for a backyard lunch. "Jenna," she said with a tone that hovered somewhere between surprise and polite acknowledgement. She stepped forward and kissed the air near my cheek. "You made it." I smiled, the kind of smile I kept for dental assistants and landlords. Elaine arrived behind her like sunshine on cue, holding a champagne flute filled with something pink and fizzing. She wore coral lipstick that caught the light and a flowy wrap dress that probably cost more than my rent. "Wow," she sang out. "You look so Atlanta." Her eyes flicked over my plain sandals and linen trousers. "Thanks," I replied, placing the pie on the edge of the table. No one moved to make room for it. A cousin I barely recognized handed me a glass of sweet tea before disappearing. My father, Russell, sat in the shade near the fence, sipping quietly and pretending to be absorbed in conversation with a man whose name he probably didn't remember. His eyes met mine briefly and then drifted down to his drink. The table groaned under trays of artisan cheese, fruit towers, and the unmistakable scent of a catering order from Salt and Vine. My pie sat in its aluminum tray with a store sticker still attached, looking out of place and unwanted. I reached for a slice of apple from the charcuterie but hesitated, suddenly aware of how long it had been since I'd eaten with these people. Corinne leaned against the railing, laughing a little too loudly at one of Elaine's stories about her wild marketing job. Something about managing 3 interns and a yoga ball chair. Her words blurred in my ears as I stood in that space, present but invisible. Then it came casually, like a side dish passed across the table. "I'm finally moving into Jenna's old apartment," Elaine chirped. "It's got the best light in the mornings." I blinked. "What?" Elaine gave me a half shrug, sipping her drink. "Mom said it makes more sense. I mean, you're barely there, right?" I opened my mouth, but Corinne stepped in. "You're always on the go, honey. Elaine needs a place that gives her space to work. You're resilient. You always find a way." I swallowed the bitter taste climbing up my throat. The apartment in Atlanta was mine. I'd signed the lease. I'd painted the walls myself after that brutal November breakup, patching dents no one else would have noticed. I'd paid the deposit from a savings account I'd grown in slow, steady steps, saying no to trips, takeout, and anything with the word splurge. I stepped into the kitchen under the excuse of needing a napkin. The AC hummed low. The fridge had the same magnet shaped like a pelican wearing sunglasses. Tucked beneath it was a printed piece of paper, folded in half but not sealed. I pulled it out with a kind of knowing ache already blooming in my chest. A scanned image of a withdrawal form stared back at me. The date was 3 weeks ago. The amount, $2,400, my account, my signature, or something close to it, and the memo line, security deposit for rental transfer. My fingers tightened around the paper until it crinkled into a sharp-edged bloom in my palm. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a miscommunication. It was a decision. Quiet, coordinated, painless, for everyone but me. I walked back out and set the crumpled paper in my purse. Elaine was still laughing, glass refilled, surrounded by people who adored her charm. My mother nodded along like a proud stage mom. No one even noticed as I slipped down the side stairs and toward the gravel driveway. The heat from the steering wheel burned my palms as I slid into the car. I paused before starting the engine, staring at the house where birthdays, apologies, and betrayals had all taken place under the same roof. "You're not taking one more thing from me," I said, almost surprised at the steadiness in my voice. Then I backed out, dust kicking up behind the tires, and drove away without looking in the rearview mirror. When Kent Myers called me, I almost didn't answer. Nothing good ever started with, "We need to talk." I was balancing my grocery bag on my hip, keys in my mouth, and sweat dripping down the back of my neck. August in Atlanta was like being wrapped in a hot, wet towel. The phone buzzed again. Kent's name blinked across the screen. I hadn't spoken to him in years, not since he helped unclog my bathroom sink during a weekend visit in college. He was Elaine's ex, someone who knew how to use a plunger and spot lies dressed in silk. He'd been kind back then, the only one who noticed when I went quiet during a family dinner and asked me later if I was okay. I wasn't, but I said I was. Now, standing in my one-bedroom apartment with the AC struggling and my hands full of bruised peaches and a roll of paper towels, I tapped answer. "Hey, Kent," I said, trying to keep it casual. "Jenna." His voice was tight. "Listen, I know this is weird, but something's been bothering me about Elaine." There it was. I dropped the keys onto the entry table, then balanced the phone between my ear and shoulder while unloading the groceries. "I'm listening," I said. "She took out a loan, in your name." I stopped. "What?" "A personal loan. I didn't know at first. I wouldn't have believed it, but I saw the paperwork." I put the milk down and walked to the living room, where a small fan pushed warm air in slow circles. The thrift store couch creaked as I sat. "How do you know it was me?" I asked. She showed me the signature, said you were fine with it. But the way she said it didn't feel right. A pause. I saved a screenshot. It's not clear, but here, I'll text it. A moment later, my phone buzzed again. The image loaded slowly, pixels sharpening into an all-too-familiar scrawl. My signature, or more precisely, the version I stopped using after grad school, the way I wrote my last name before I learned how to make it look grown up. I closed my eyes. The paper in the screenshot was a standard application. $60,000, fixed term, low interest rate, assuming solid credit. "She didn't have your permission, did she?" Kent asked, voice softer now. "No," I said. "She didn't." After the call, I sat for a long time, the fan blades slicing the silence. I opened my laptop and messaged Lucas. "Me, you still have contacts in consumer finance law?" Lucas, "Why? What happened?" Me, "Elaine took out a loan in my name, $60,000. Lucas, "Jesus, okay, I'll call you." The phone rang before I could respond. Lucas had that way of speaking, measured, no wasted words. "Send me everything. I'll cross-check the lender's database. If she used your social or prior address, they'll have IP logs. I've seen this before." As we talked, I opened my old email folder. I hadn't touched it in months. There, buried between newsletters and receipts, was a message from Elaine dated February 3rd. Subject: Quick favor for Mom Body. "Hey, can you send me that tax document from your old job? Mom needs it for something. Just forward when you get a sec." I'd replied 2 hours later with the PDF. Back then, I didn't ask questions. It was easier to assume good intentions. I leaned back, staring at the cracks in my ceiling. They spidered out from the light fixture, like the nerves in my chest. Later that night, I pulled out my manila folder labeled Financial. I started printing everything, screenshots, the email, my lease documents, even the receipts for the account I'd used to build that $60,000. Each line item told a story: microwave dinners, roommates, canceled road trips. I'd chosen progress over pleasure, one decision at a time. In my kitchenette, the smell of something faintly spoiled rose from the drain. I ignored it. The coffee pot gurgled, and I poured a cup into my cracked white mug, the one I'd gotten from my grad school welcome kit. The logo had faded, but the chip on the handle was still sharp. I sipped, staring at the stack of documents. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. Not yet. That night, I dreamed about a younger version of me walking into a bank, handing over my dreams in exchange for a future I never got. I woke up early and reread everything. Then I highlighted each place my information appeared on the forged loan application: my date of birth, my old employer, the apartment address I'd lived in 5 years ago. Every detail was hers now. Taken, not offered. Just after noon, my inbox pinged. Subject line, Inheritance Planning Meeting, RSVP required. The email was brief: a gathering of the family to discuss the estate, scheduled for Charleston. 10 days from today. I stared at it. So this was it. No one had called to ask if I'd be coming. No mention of what the meeting would entail. Just a date, an address, a chair they'd assumed I'd sit in like always, nodding along while they rearranged my life. But this time, I had something else to bring to the table. They wanted a family meeting. I brought the truth in a manila folder. Downtown Charleston hummed with quiet activity as I climbed the worn marble steps of Bernard Fox's law office. The old brick building sat between a florist and a cafe with outdoor seating, where a couple sipped cold brew under a wide red umbrella. It was late morning, but the air already pressed heavy against the skin, full of humidity and the smell of magnolia. Inside, ceiling fans spun lazily above thick crown molding. Dark green carpet muffled every step. A tray of untouched butter cookies sat on the side table, next to a stack of napkins folded into triangles. I arrived early, wearing a cream blouse, flats, and the same silver earrings I'd worn to my first job interview. Not for show, just for balance. Bernard's assistant, a young woman named Krista, smiled politely and offered me water. I declined. When the others arrived, the room changed temperature. Elaine entered first, greeting Krista with a chirpy, "Love your shoes," before floating into the meeting room like she'd been invited to a garden party. She wore pastel blue, her lipstick glossy and precise. Behind her came Corinne in a beige wrap dress, sunglasses still perched on her head like a crown. Russell trailed behind, quiet, his shirt slightly wrinkled at the collar. We sat around a polished mahogany table that smelled faintly of lemon oil. Bernard Fox, lean and gray-haired with a careful voice, welcomed us and reviewed the agenda. The estate would remain in the family, he said, but certain decisions required open discussion. Elaine leaned forward, fingers delicately intertwined. "Obviously, the beach house means so much to me. I live nearby. I've been hosting most of the events. I just feel, emotionally, it's where I belong." I waited. Corinne nodded along, eyes warm toward Elaine. Russell stared at a bookshelf across the room, his hands resting on his knees. Bernard continued, discussing maintenance costs, taxes, and potential refinancing options. The tone was cordial, routine. Then the conversation shifted to individual assets: the beach house, the apartment, the trust fund. That was my moment. I reached into my tote and set the manila folder on the table. The sound was soft, but it stopped the room. "I'd like to address something," I said evenly. "Before we divide anything, we need to correct what's already been taken." Elaine's eyes narrowed, just slightly. Corinne's lips pressed together. I opened the folder and slid the papers across to Bernard. "This is a copy of a personal loan taken out in my name. $60,000, forged signature, old employment and address history. All mine." Bernard adjusted his glasses. The room seemed to shrink. "I have digital records showing the request came from Elaine's IP address," I continued, "and emails requesting personal documents under the pretense of tax needs. I didn't authorize this. I didn't benefit from it. But I carry the debt." Elaine shifted in her chair. "You're blowing this out of proportion." "No," I said calmly. "I'm stating facts." Corinne sat still, blinking slowly as though trying to absorb what was unfolding. "I want repayment. I said. 7 days. Full amount. If not, I will file a formal report and pursue legal action, quietly but firmly. Russell cleared his throat but said nothing. Bernard looked between us, uncertain whether to intervene. Then Corinne spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. You weren't supposed to find that. That sentence sat in the room like a dropped vase, silent, broken, undeniable. Elaine's tone turned sharp. You'd ruin your sister over this? After everything? I turned to her, meeting her gaze without flinching. Number you already did. There was no yelling, no tears, just a hush that settled over everyone, more final than any signature. No one touched the cookies. The air felt thick. Even the ceiling fan seemed slower, as though the room had absorbed too much weight. I stood, gathering my folder. I'll expect an update in a week. Then I walked out. I expected anger, but nothing prepared me for the silence. Rain tapped against the wide windows of the beach house like a soft, persistent knocking that never got an answer. Thunder mumbled in the distance, not quite ready to commit. Inside, the lighting was dim, lamps instead of overheads, as if brightness might fracture something already hanging by threads. I sat at the kitchen bar alone, eating a slice of bland chicken salad on a paper plate. Around me, the remnants of an abandoned gathering lingered. Fruit trays half wilted, champagne flutes rinsed and lined on the counter, a peach cobbler untouched under plastic wrap. It had always been Elaine's favorite, made the same way since we were kids, with brown sugar crust and just enough cinnamon to warm the edges. No one reached for it now. The house felt padded, like someone had stuffed the air with cotton to mute any sound. The playlist Corinne curated for relaxed family evenings played softly from the living room. Piano covers of pop songs, the notes barely reached the kitchen. I sipped water and tried not to think too hard. The hallway creaked. I didn't turn around. You happy now? Elaine's voice was hoarse but steady. I turned to find her standing just past the stairwell, one hand gripping the banister. She looked tired. Foundation cracked near her mouth, mascara slightly smeared like she'd rubbed her eyes without thinking. No, I said. Not even close. She stepped closer, but not all the way. Her jaw tightened. You humiliated me. In front of Bernard, in front of Mom and Dad, over paperwork. I set down my fork. It wasn't just paperwork, Elaine, I said. It was theft. I was going to pay it back. When? Before or after the second loan? She froze. You thought I wouldn't find out, I added. Elaine blinked rapidly. I needed it. You wouldn't understand. I tilted my head. That's the problem. Footsteps approached from the den. Corinne entered, her hair tucked behind her ears, a glass of white wine trembling slightly in her hand. She didn't look at me right away. She was desperate, Jenna, she said, voice soft but firm. Desperate people do desperate things. I nodded once. Then you must have been desperate too. Corinne's eyes flicked up. I opened my phone and pulled up the transfer confirmation, walked it over. This shows your initials on the authorization form for the deposit. The money came directly from my savings account. Corinne stared at the screen, didn't blink. You signed off, I continued. Maybe you didn't know the full story, or maybe you did. Her mouth opened, closed. I thought you'd already let it go. A flash of something cracked through me, but not rage, just deep, hollow fatigue. Russell passed by in the hallway, pretending to look for something on a shelf. He muttered, without stopping, "Let's not make this worse than it has to be." "Dad," I called after him, "you can say something, or not. But don't pretend you weren't there when it happened." He paused, his back to me. "This doesn't need to be a scandal." Then he walked off. Elaine made a sound like a laugh, but it ended too sharply. "You're so self-righteous, Jenna. Always have been. You just can't let anything go." I didn't answer. She grabbed her phone from the table and stormed up the stairs. 15 minutes later, she came back down, dragging a small carry-on suitcase and a tote bag. Her eyes were red, her cheeks streaked. She paused by the door. "You don't win anything, you know," she whispered. "I never wanted to." She left. The front door closed with a soft but final click. Corinne stood frozen for a moment, then downed the last inch of wine in one gulp and walked off toward the guest bedroom. A second later, the door slammed. Hard. I sat back at the counter, staring at my plate. The salad had gone warm. I carried the dish to the sink, rinsed it quietly, then washed and dried it like I'd done 100 times before. The towel was one of the old monogrammed ones from the house's heyday. Gold embroidery, slightly frayed. I folded it carefully and hung it back on the oven handle. My phone buzzed in my pocket. "Lucas, she tried to get another loan today. Denied. The fraud alert worked, but she's scrambling." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then I turned toward the hallway and switched off the kitchen light. Outside, the rain came down harder, but inside, everything was still. There's a strange power in filing a police report, with no anger, no yelling, just facts. The detective sat across from me, her expression neutral but focused, hands poised over her keyboard. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee. I handed over the file Lucas helped me prepare. Loan documents, screenshots, emails, IP logs, and identity verification. Each sheet marked a small erosion of trust, now stacked in neat chronological order. She flipped through them with the same attention I'd once given to monthly expense reports. Nothing emotional, just verification, just process. "You're sure you didn't authorize this?" she asked. "I'm sure," I replied. "She's my sister." A pause. She looked up, then nodded. Back outside, the sky had softened into early autumn, the kind of gold light that made even cracked sidewalks look romantic. Leaves hadn't turned yet, but the air held a promise that the seasons were shifting. Lucas waited for me outside the building. He leaned against his car, sipping from a to-go cup. When I walked up, he didn't say anything, just offered the other half of his croissant. I took it. We drove to the rooftop cafe above an old converted mill. The host knew him by name and led us to a quiet corner table overlooking the skyline. A breeze swept through the canopy of string lights. From here, Atlanta looked peaceful, its edges blurred by sun haze and distance. "I'm proud of you," Lucas said, stirring his tea. "You didn't hesitate." "I did," I replied, just not out loud. We clinked glasses, mine filled with ginger soda, his with something citrusy and pale. For a moment, we sat in silence, letting the quiet feel less like absence and more like rest. "There's something else," he said, reaching into his satchel. "Came in this morning." He slid a folder toward me. Inside was a formal offer. Vice President of Finance, Asia Pacific Region, Westfield and Quiver, based in Hong Kong. "Effective October 1st, he added. "They want a decision by next week." I ran my thumb along the edge of the document. "That's a lot of ocean between here and there." "Sometimes distance isn't about escape," he said. "It's about breathing room." My phone buzzed. Kent Myers. Just wanted to say, "You were right not to trust her. She tried to use me too. Again." I locked the screen without replying. I thought of that rainy night almost 10 years ago, sitting in a parking lot outside a rehab facility while Elaine signed herself in for the 3rd time. I'd brought her sweatpants, a bag of toiletries, and a journal with blank pages she never filled. I sat in the car for hours, engine off, windshield fogging, refusing to leave until I saw the lights in her room turn off. And even then, I waited. Back at my apartment that evening, I stood by the window as dusk settled. The hallway smelled faintly of fried food from a neighbor's kitchen. I set the job offer on the table and stared at it. I thought about all the things I'd wanted once. Stability, a sense of belonging, an open invitation to be loved. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. And now, maybe, I had a shot at it. I emailed Lucas my decision. Subject, Hong Kong body. Tell them yes, and thank you. Not long after, there was a knock at the door. I hesitated, checked the peephole. Corinne stood there, her hands clutching a worn velvet box, her eyes unsure. I opened the door slowly. "Hi," she said, voice raspier than usual. "May I come in?" She didn't wait for permission. She stepped inside and held out the box like it weighed more than it should. I opened it at the kitchen counter. Inside were old photographs, faded drawings, and a folded envelope with my name written in my childhood handwriting. My college acceptance letter peeked out beneath a stack of notes I'd scribbled as a teenager. Little goals I'd once imagined for myself. "You kept these?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer, just nodded. We stood there in the quiet hum of the refrigerator and city sounds outside. The air between us no longer sharp, just unfamiliar. Some wounds close without fanfare. Others require the slow work of acknowledgement. "I'm leaving soon," I said. "I know," she replied. She sat across from me like a stranger, but her eyes, they were my own. The jasmine tea had cooled between us. I hadn't touched mine in minutes. Outside, the lights of Victoria Harbor blinked through the open balcony doors. The air smelled of sea and faint incense, and inside, my apartment held that soft, weightless quiet only a foreign city can offer. We were oceans away from Charleston, but somehow closer to truth. Corinne reached for her cup with both hands. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she studied the rim of the porcelain, her thumbs circling it like she was searching for something smooth to hold on to. "I thought," she began slowly, "that protecting Elaine was saving the family." She didn't look at me when she said it, just out toward the water. I didn't answer, not because I didn't have words, but because silence sometimes tells the truth more clearly than speech. She pulled the velvet box from her bag and set it gently on the table between us, just as she had at my apartment in Atlanta. This time, she didn't open it. She just waited. We sipped tea without ceremony. In a different life, I might have wanted an apology shaped like a speech, neatly worded, full of contrition. But now, sitting in a city where no one knew our names, I realized I didn't need theater. I needed something quiet, something honest. My phone buzzed beside me. Elaine. I hesitated, then picked up. Her face appeared, dimly lit from a desk lamp. She wore no makeup. Her hair was tied back. Behind her, a small apartment with beige walls and drying dishes in the sink. "I just finished my shift," she said. "Call center. I answer billing questions now." Her voice wasn't defensive, just tired, real. "I clean my own dishes, pay my own bills," she added. I nodded. "How's it going?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Hard, but honest. We were quiet for a moment. Then I said, "You don't owe me anything, Elaine. But you owe it to yourself to keep going." Her eyes welled, but she didn't cry. "Thanks, Jenna." After the call ended, Corinne and I sat again in silence, broken only by the harbor's hush and the distant echo of ferry horns. That night, after she left for her hotel, I lit a single candle on the desk. I opened my leather-bound notebook, the one I'd carried from Atlanta to here, and wrote slowly under the soft pool of light. Home is not where they accept you. It's where you finally accept yourself. Then I picked up my phone and typed a message. To Corinne. "If you ever want to come back, I'll be here, but I won't wait forever." I set the phone down beside the candle and leaned back in the chair. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was waiting for anything at all. Sometimes healing doesn't come in a grand apology. It comes in a quiet moment over jasmine tea or a message left open like a door. Sitting across from my mother, I realized forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace without surrendering your worth. In life, we often bend ourselves into shapes to be accepted by others. But true growth begins when we accept ourselves. Family doesn't have to mean agreement or approval. Sometimes it simply means making room for someone to return when they're ready. And when they do, it's okay to let them in, just not all the way at once. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share your experience or follow along for more stories that reflect the quiet strength of second chances.